Alright, good morning ladies and gents. Today we are going to start our red velvet cupcakes. Now with today's recipe, most of you are used to seeing red velvet cakes out in stores, and they're like a super bright red. They're like brighter than this box. What a red velvet cake is, it's a chocolate cake that has been dyed red so extremely that the color is this kind of artificial bright brick red. While red velvet cakes are good, that extra food coloring isn't as great in my opinion. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a red velvet cake just without the food coloring. The color is a lot less bright brick red and more of a brownish red. Still tastes just as good, it's just, without all that food coloring. Now, you can do this recipe and try to make it more red by adding a bunch of food coloring. It's going to throw off the recipe, and also in my opinion, it just doesn't add anything as far as flavor and texture, but that's up to you. Alright, as far as the ingredients, you're going to need 2 ounces or 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Remember, unsalted. 5.2 ounces of brown sugar, or 3/4 of a cup packed. So getting your measuring cup, kind of packing the brown sugar in there, that should get you about 5.2 ounces. 1 egg, 4 ounces or 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour, 0.8 ounces of natural cocoa powder, or 1/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. Now, the cocoa powder that you need for this is natural, regular cocoa powder. Okay, I'm gonna come up to the camera here and I can show you something real quick. Here, I'm just zoomed in here. You're gonna want to use natural cocoa powder. You do not want cocoa powder that has been Dutch processed or special dark or anything like that. The difference is because the cocoa powder here on the left is a slightly acidic cocoa powder, the thing that you normally find in grocery stores, no problem. Whereas Dutch processed cocoa powder, while delicious in its own right because it dissolves more easily in drinks, in fact it leads more of a chocolate flavor than regular cocoa powder, whereas the cocoa powder kind of has more depth of flavor with some tones of bitterness, some acidity in there. This is just smooth natural chocolate. The problem is in this recipe we need that slight acidity here. We need that in order for the recipe to work. Okay, so you cannot substitute special dark chocolate. You have to go with regular cocoa powder. Okay. So, like I said, 1/4 of a cup or 0.8 ounces of natural cocoa powder. Half a teaspoon each of kosher salt, half a teaspoon each of kosher salt and baking soda. And then 1/4 of a cup, or 4 ounces. 4 ounces or half of a cup of buttermilk. If you do not have buttermilk, then you can substitute this with just half a cup or 4 ounces of milk, and then add a teaspoon of vinegar. Whether it's apple cider vinegar, red wine vinegar, white vinegar, does not matter. Okay, what buttermilk is, just really quickly, is it's milk that has been slightly soured with a bacteria. Usually we think of bacteria as spoiling food. However, there's bacteria in all sorts of healthy foods such as yogurt, cheese, sour cream, buttermilk. The bacteria slightly sours the milk, thickens it up a little bit, and adds flavor to it. So we are going to be using buttermilk because it adds a little bit of a nice tang to the cake. Not to make it sour, but just to kind of brighten up all the other flavors in this cake. Like I said, if you do not have buttermilk, you can just use regular milk mixed with a teaspoon of vinegar. Okay, we need the acidity from that milk for this recipe to work. And then finally, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay? Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Step number 1 on your mise en place sheet, you're going to set your oven for 375 degrees. 375 degrees. Now, today we are going to be going through what is called the creaming method. If you remember back to Baking and Pastry 1 where you learned about the different mixing methods, the creaming method is where you cream together softened solid fat, in this case butter, and you're creaming together the butter and the sugar. And what happens here is that the sugar punches a bunch of little holes into the fat, creating a bunch of air pockets. That air is what is going to help leaven and rise this cake, as well as help the cakes bake more evenly. It also increases the yield, meaning you get taller cakes or more cookies out of the same ingredients than if you were to not do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move the camera over to the mixing bowl so you can kind of see what's going on. Okay, so step 1 here, I'm going to combine and cream together the sugar and the butter at high speed. So in goes the butter, in goes the brown sugar. Hold on, brown sugar's stuck to the bowl. There we go. And I'm also going to add in the kosher salt. Alright, so now, super important here, you want to take your time during this. If you do not have a stand mixer, you can use an electric hand mixer or do this by hand, either way. If you're doing it with the stand mixer, you need to cream this together for at least 5 minutes at high speed. Okay, you do not want to skip on this step. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about the creaming method in class and later as we go on, but for now, if you are using a stand mixer, you need to cream this together for at least 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. If you're using an electric hand mixer, you need to beat this together for at least 10 minutes. And if you're going by hand, 10 to 15 minutes, you're just going to have to use good old-fashioned arm power. So we're going to cream this together. So I'm going to start at a very low speed to start, to make sure I don't fling brown sugar and butter everywhere. And then once the butter starts to break up, oh, that's a little too quick. Now, ideally, you want your butter to be at room temperature. My butter here is a little bit too cold. That's okay. I just need to take a little more time creaming this. Okay, so now you can see it's a lot lighter, a lot fluffier. Okay, now we're going to go to the next step, which is to add in 1 egg along with the vanilla. Okay, so I'm going to then just beat that together for a minute. And then the 4th step, so next step after that, is you're going to combine the flour, cocoa powder, and baking soda together. And I'm going to tell you what to do next with that. So combining the flour, cocoa powder, and baking soda, that is step 4. We'll then go to the next step right after this is incorporated together. very important step here. Make sure to scrape down not only the sides of the bowl, but also the paddle itself to make sure nothing, no sugar, no butter, nothing is clean to the sides of the bowl. Okay, so there we go. Okay, now this is the, I believe, the fourth step. No, sorry, the fifth step, my bad. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to add in both the buttermilk and the flour mixture, but you can't dump them in at once. If you dump in all of the flour now, you're gonna have to mix this too much and it's going to develop gluten, leading to a tougher cake. If you were to, on the other hand, add in all the liquid and all the buttermilk now, not only would the batter be a lumpy mess, but you would also have a problem where you're adding fat and water together, and they don't like to get along. If you've ever had a bottle of salad dressing, oil and water do not like to mix. They will separate. So what do we do here? So what we're going to do is we're going to add these together in increments. So for the fifth step here, I'm going to add in about a third of the dry ingredients. It doesn't have to be exact, but about a third of them. And I'm just going to mix that together just until I don't see any more dry flour. Okay, you do not want to overmix this. Okay, so once I see that there's no more dry flour, or almost no dry flour, like that. I know there's some little bits there. Okay, so a third of the flour mixture. Now I'm going to add in about half of the buttermilk. Increase the speed. Go slow here, otherwise you'll fling milk all over your kitchen. Okay, then when that's incorporated, I'm going to incorporate another third of the flour mixture. Then the rest of the milk. And then once that's incorporated, the rest of the flour. Okay. I'm going to stop the mixer, make sure to scrape down the sides of the bowl. So to review that last step that we just did, you're going to add in about a third of the flour mixture, then add in half of the buttermilk mixture, then add in another third of the flour, the other half of the buttermilk mixture, and then the rest of the dry ingredients. It sounds more complicated than it really is. Just basically you're going back and forth with the flour and then the buttermilk to make sure that you're not over mixing this, but also not leading to a broken, greasy cake batter. Okay, so I'm just scraping to make sure that's all incorporated. Now, as you can see, this is pretty much a chocolate cake. That's what a red velvet cake is. Think how dark this cake batter is right now. And think about how bright red, red velvet cakes are in grocery stores. Think about how much food coloring they got to put into this to make this bright red. And you realize that red velvet cakes are a little weird. Okay, so. And there we go, and that's our cake batter. So now I'm going to move the camera, and we go to our last step here, or our second to last step as far as the cake is concerned. Okay, so now I'm going to get my muffin tin. Now, if you do not have a muffin tin like this, you can use a regular cake pan. Obviously, you're not going to be making cupcakes in that case, but that is totally fine. You do not have to grease the cupcake liners. If you don't have cupcake liners, then you can just bake it right into the tin, no biggie. I would, in that case, if you do bake it directly in the muffin tin, I would definitely spray it or grease it with some sort of oil or fat, so that way it comes out. Okay, now this recipe should make about 6 or so cupcakes. It just depends on the size of your muffin tin. I have 8 lined up just in case, but that's just my experience. Okay, so what I'm going to do to just ensure that every portion is the same size is I'm going to use this kind of disher. Now, some of you would know this more as an ice cream scoop, but in baking, having the same size for each dessert or each cupcake is really important, because if you portion them out evenly, they're going to cook evenly. If you don't portion them out evenly, they're going to bake unevenly, and you're going to have cakes or cookies that, you know, some are burnt and some are perfectly made. Not ideal. Okay, so make sure to get every last bit of cake batter here. You want these to go, say, just about or a little more than halfway up the liner. I know mine, it's a little bit taller than that. That is fine. I don't mind having a taller cake here. Now, my recipe makes, it's looking like it's going to actually make 8. And that's perfect. This is one benefit of taking the time to cream together the butter and the sugar together, instead of just like kind of, oops, spilled a little bit there. That is fine. Instead of just, say, you know, just combining the sugar and the butter together just until there's no more dry sugar, I actually want to take the time to cream together the butter and the sugar until it's light and airy. If you did not do that, then most likely your recipe is going to yield less cakes. That one looks really ugly, but that's okay. I'll just move that one to the side and we'll keep that away from everyone. All right, so with these cupcakes, they are lined and ready to go. You're gonna put them in your oven from anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes or until the toothpick comes out not clean, but almost clean, okay? Not all the way clean. Remember, we talked about that. If you put a toothpick in and it comes out completely clean, it's overcooked. All right, so while this is baking, I'm gonna go ahead and make a cream cheese frosting. You can use a store-bought frosting if you would like, but making one is so much easier. Ours is really, really easy, and it's a lot more tasty. Okay, I'm gonna bake these, and then I'll see you in a little bit. All right, so here we're back at the mixer. We're going to make a cream cheese frosting, which is what is normally served on red velvet cakes. Now, this you can easily scale up if you want more frosting. I'm just making a small amount here just to kind of show you how to make this. So for the ingredients for this, in the bowl that you can see right now, this is a completely separate recipe. So on your mise en place sheet, if you want to kind of put this separate from everything else, you can. So in this case, I have in my bowl 3 ounces of cream cheese. Now, I am not going to give a volume measurement for that. The reason being, when you look at a package of cream cheese, it has all of the markings on the side that say, you know, how many ounces it is. So that one you'll be able to do by weight no matter what. As far as the butter, I have 1.5 ounces or 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter, a pinch of kosher salt, okay, or about 1/8 of a teaspoon. And on the side, I'm not putting in right now, but on the side I have 4 ounces of powdered sugar, which is a little under 1 cup of sugar, okay? But you may want to adjust that later. I'll talk about that here in a second. So to make the frosting, all I'm gonna do is I'm going to just cream this together until it's all the way smooth, okay? Super important here that as you're creaming or beating this together, that you do scrape down the sides of the bowl. With cream cheese and fats, especially when you're making frostings, you need them to be smooth before you add in the sugar. If you try to smooth it out afterwards, it's going to be all clumpy and gritty and not going to be nice. So make sure this is completely smooth. Now, I'm going to very carefully add in the powdered sugar and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now, trust me, go slow with this. Otherwise, you will fling powdered sugar all over your kitchen. So, slowly. Once there's no more powdered sugar, then you can crank up the speed. But for now, go slow, easy does it. Okay. Once that powdered sugar kind of is dissolved or it's dissolving, then you can kind of stop, scrape down the sides of the bowl real quick. And then, oops, back up with the speed. Okay, once you see all of the powdered sugar is incorporated, you can then crank up the speed and beat this for 2 to 3 minutes until it's nice, light, and airy. And there we go. There's my frosting. Now you can double up this recipe if you would like, but that is up to you.